Hi everyone, this is your friend Vijay Adav back with another video in the Clark University series vlogs. And in this video, we are going to discuss more about internships. And in this video, I have a special guest with me, Mr. Todd Bartlett, and he is the director of Experiential Learning. So of course, I will let him introduce himself and talk more to you. But in this video, we are going to talk more about the questions that you posted on my YouTube comments about internships and everything. So Todd, students are very happy to listen to you. And of course, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and to be able to hopefully shed a little bit more light around the internship processes, clarify maybe some questions around CPT, OPT. I know there's a lot of questions and a lot of confusion, so hopefully we can use this time today to be able to educate everyone on the processes and answer some lingering questions that many of you have.
Yeah, so the reason to do this is, of course, last week I did a session with Tara Mason. So we discussed more about academic related questions, and that was very helpful for the students that I have on my YouTube channel. So they requested that if you can do more on internships and CPT and OPT, which is kind of confusing for us for sure. And it has like a lot of questions. So this is the reason I reached out to you and then thought let's do this thing. So again, thanks a lot for your time. So the first question is, of course, to understand what exactly CPT is and what exactly OPT is. So if you can help us understand the differences, and that will help us actually.
Sure. So CPT and OPT are really avenues that allow students to be able to gain work experiences related to their field of study. So CPT, which is curricular practical training, is a designation that's related to internship. So allows students to be able to pursue internship opportunities related to their area of study, and to be able to get that hands-on real-world experience that's critical for solidifying everything that you're learning in the classroom. OPT again is kind of a work designation that's more post-graduation, and so it's optional practical training, which means that it allows you to be able to work in your field of study for a certain period of time. And that changes based on whether it's you have a STEM extension or if you're in a non-STEM degree, and we can talk a little bit further about that. But really it allows you to be able to utilize your degree program and gain real-world experience post-graduation.
Yeah. And so that summarizes like CPT is more once we are in the program itself, right? And OPT is something that is done once the program is over, we graduate something.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. That clarifies actually, because there's two terms a lot of people do not understand when they are in the course itself, right? So with that explanation, the second question that I get like asked is the eligibility criteria for F1 students, especially when it comes to internships, and then understanding the duration of STEM program and non-STEM program. So if you can help us understand the eligibility criteria and the differences of STEM, non-STEM.
Sure. I think the first eligibility criteria is that you have to have completed 2 full-time semesters of study in the United States before you would be eligible to use your CPT, which is the designation for internships.
Correct.
And so, that's kind of number one. If you're coming from a undergraduate institution and you've already completed those directly in the U.S., those 2 full-time summers, you can come in and do an internship right away.
Yeah.
For many of you that may be coming from your home country and received your undergraduate degree or coming in directly from a workplace, you need to complete those 2 full-time semesters in the U.S. Before you're eligible for utilizing your CPT. However, there are volunteer opportunities and ways that you can gain some experience. So my recommendation would be don't limit yourself to internships. Have a discussion with either myself or our Assistant Director of Experiential Learning, Colin Moore, and we can talk about ways that you can really utilize that first year, because that first year is going to be important to helping you develop the skills and capabilities to be able to show that you have those competencies on a resume to secure an internship. And there's a lot of other career development activities that you want to be focused on during that first year as well.
Correct. So just to give an example, so I'm an international student on F1 visa right now, right? And I come from India. So I am pursuing MSDA degree, and I will be eligible for internship only if I complete 2 full semesters in Clark University. and
Yep.
only then I'm eligible for internship. Before that, it's not possible, of course, because that's how the law works here, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a government regulation, and so there's we don't have a lot of negotiation or any negotiation around that. So that's just something that the U.S. government sets as a standard policy.
Okay, and as you said, so that's the same thing for graduate as well as undergraduate both, if they're coming from outside the US.
Correct.
Okay, and it is different for the people who are local here, right? They don't have to go through this.
Correct. So if you don't require any sort of visa process,
Yeah.
that is different. So if you're a domestic student and you're not on an F1 visa, you could pursue an internship during your first semester.
Oh, that's great. So if they get a good opportunity after their first semester itself, they take a break and they can do the job and they can join the college back anytime for the local.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so they could pursue an internship while they're doing their studies. They, if they decide for some reason if they needed to pursue a work opportunity and wanted to come back in at a program at a later point,
Yeah.
they could do that as well. There's not the same restrictions.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of given. So of course that is helpful information. And to further understand the differences of STEM program and non-STEM program, because we in SPS have a lot of STEM program, right? So how is that different from our program as compared to someone else who's not having a non-STEM thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So on CPT, there's really not much of a difference, and so there's no real differences between STEM or non-STEM in terms of internship capabilities. Where it becomes a factor is on your OPT. So once you graduate, there's a difference. So we have a shortage of technical workers in the United States, and so the government has decided that they wanted to give some incentives to employers to hire candidates on their OPT. And by doing that, one of the things that they've done is they've provided an extension. So for a non-STEM student, so maybe someone in our MPA program or a student in our MSc program, which are not STEM designated programs, you have 12 months of OPT. So that means you can work in the U.S. for 12 months before you would have to go through the H-1B visa process to secure more of a long-term visa. And so you have 12 months to be able to work in your field of study post-graduation. With STEM students, you have your 12 months, but then there's a 24-month extension. So you actually have 36 months to be able to work in the U.S. Before having to go for a longer-term visa.
Okay. So that's just for the STEM program. So that's the added benefit, of course. And just to clarify, when you mentioned MPA, so that's like public administration, and the other one is communications.
Communications.
Okay. And rest of all others, like the one I'm pursuing is like data analytics, computer science, project management, IT. They all are STEM programs.
Those are all STEM designated programs, correct?
Okay, that's got it. So of course that's very helpful to understand. Right. So now taking this understanding, now considering a situation that suppose I'm done with my 2 semesters now and I have an offer from some company for internship. So what is the procedure of applying for a internship here in Clark, or how do I just go ahead and take the next step once I have the offer?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So what you would do is you would submit your offer letter to me and show that you have proof of employment. In that offer letter, it has to contain certain information. So it has to indicate how many hours per week you'll be working. It has to be on company letterhead. Has to discuss the duration of employment. It has to give us a general overview of what your responsibilities are so that we know it ties back to your degree program. Yeah. If it's paid or unpaid, and if it's paid, how much that is, and then list who your contact or your supervisor would be. And once we receive that offer letter, what I do is I provide an override in the system so that you can go in and you can register for the internship class. And if you're a student that's on an F1 visa status, the following step after that is you'll have to go to the ISSO portal, apply for your CPT. You'll put me as a recommender. I will then get an email from the ISSO, fill out a form for you to be able to get your CPT. The ISSO will take a look and either approve or deny your CPT based on your individual circumstances. And then from there, you'll have completed all the steps required to do the
Okay,
internship.
got it. So there are like two major things involved. Of course, we should have a offer letter, of course, and then you being the director of the program, we have to take the approval from your side, and you will provide an override in the system. That's what happens. And then, of course, it goes to ISSO as well for the approval. So that's where the final step will happen.
Yeah, it doesn't manually go to ISSO, so the key point there is that the student will have to go to the ISSO portal and apply for their CPT.
Yeah. All right. So if you have more questions about ISSO, of course, I have planned another video with ISSO team 2 for the next week, I believe. So I'll ask more in detail questions about CPT and OPT specifically, and more about jobs off campus, on campus, those kind of things as well.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd stress there is that the ISSO are really the resident experts when it comes to CPT, OPT, visa requirements. And so Colin and I on the career service side, we know enough to kind of scratch the surface, but it's, there's a lot of changing factors. It's very dynamic. It's a very convoluted process. And so my advice is always check in with the ISSO. They're the experts in this realm, and as an international student, it's important to have a good relationship with the ISSO.
Yeah, absolutely, that's very true. So of course, I know a couple of people there in office, so they have been very helpful. And then when I reached out to you last week to understand the situation, like the internship situation of my itself, so that's where I figured out, okay, few questions are there which even I did not understand in the first. So I thought, okay, this information is something which a lot of people will have, and then. Again, with this video, I hope that these things will be clarified further. So again, that's again, if you have further more questions, ask in the comments, of course. And now with that, I'll go to the next question, which is like procedure of applying the internship. You got it. I asked procedure of applying, so you have to, of course, show the offer letter to you, and that's what happens in the system, and then it go to the ISSO, and then it will provide approval or denial, like that. While mentioning that, you said that it could be unpaid or paid. So I have this question on the paid side. So is there any limit on the salary that could be offered to the students from the company itself, or because we work hourly basis on campus? So is it related, or it could be on any scale, whatever the company is offering you?
No, it could be on any scale. The contract is between you and the employer, and so it really comes down to what the employer has in their budget.
Yeah.
There are certain fields and functions that, are more likely to pay than other fields and functions, given on how hard it is to recruit for that talent. And so there's no limitations. There are limitations on terms of the number of hours that you can work, but there's no limitations in terms of what you can earn.
Okay, so talking about the number of hours, so there are these two periods, I would say, that students can pursue internship. One is winter and one is summer. So do you think there is any difference if a student pursues internship in a winter, which I will be doing next semester, or someone who's pursuing the internship in summer? So are there any major pros and cons, or any differences you might say?
So I guess the first thing I do, I'd probably clarify. So you can do an internship. So you have your fall semester, right? You can do the internship, the spring semester, which is kind of that winter period where you can do your internship, and then you have your summer semester. So there's actually 3 periods that you could potentially do an internship. During the academic year, so during the fall or winter, you would typically need to limit your hours to 20 hours per week. The only situation where that may not be that may not come into play is that if you only have one class left and you're just doing your internship, it's your last semester, you're not in a full-time course load, there is a pre-employment kind of full-time CPT option that you can use. But if you are enrolled full-time in the university, it can't be more than 20 hours per week. And so those are important considerations to factor in as well. The other aspect you discussed was, is there a benefit?
Yeah.
I think sometimes there can be more internship opportunities in the summer than in the winter or fall. And those probably typically relate more to bigger companies that have internship programs, so really kind of formalized internship programs. They're typically recruiting for a summer class. They're using that as a talent pipeline to find candidates to be able to bring into the organization. You see that with really large companies. But there are still internship opportunities out there, particularly in the fall or spring. There's probably just not as many.
Yeah, that's correct, actually. So I have this personal experience of myself too. I was applying for internship for the spring, but whoever reached out to me back, they are like, we have internships available for the summers, but not for the winters. So as you said, it's a very important point to remember that in fact, that was my case too, because now, as I said, that in the fall I would be finishing my almost every subject. I'll be left with only two, which is one is internship and capstone, right? So in this case specifically, I am eligible to do 40 hours of internship in this in the running semester, which is spring semester as well. So that's the only case when you can do 40 hours.
Yeah, and just note that you do have to get permission from the ISSO to
Correct.
do that. And so it does require permission to be able to do that.
Yeah, okay. But again, so of course that is an aspect which has to be taken care of. But as you mentioned, that it's just if you have more courses left to do in the next semester, then probably you are not eligible to do 40 hours in a running semester. Only in summer you can do it, because summer it's fine for you to take 40 hours. It's available.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing to understand. Okay, that's helpful. Apart from this, the question I had one more is. Oh yes, this is also an important question. So people, let's say students who are pursuing some degree, like for example, I'm taking a data analytics degree, right? So is it required for me to take the internship in the relevant field itself, or suppose I get a good offer from someone else, which is not that as related to my own degree program, but something related to that,
Yeah.
a little farther than what I have been studying? Is that allowed, or is that okay?
No, it should be related. So one of the things that the government looks at is they really look at an internship as a learning experience, and
Yeah.
so the goal here is that it should be related to your field of study. Now, there's
Okay.
probably a little bit of wiggle room in terms of what that means. So, for instance, if you're in the project management program and you're studying IT project management, and you get a internship as a business analyst, which has some project management in there, you're likely to get approved for that and to be able to do that because you can show the connection between what you're learning and what the internship is going to provide. But if for some reason, let's say you were in a data analytics
Yeah.
program and you got hired in a role for a marketing, a graphic designer position,
Yeah,
which
correct.
required no data analytics.
Yeah.
It doesn't relate to the degree program, so therefore you're probably likely to get denied because it
Yeah.
has to have some relatability there.
So this is the important thing that ISO might look at when it goes to the approval process.
Exactly.
Got it. So, for example, let's say I'm doing data analytics, and if my roles would be like more of a data scientist or machine learning engineer. But if I get some job or some role from the company of being a data science manager, let's say that's like in a managerial level, it's not really a technical, but that's okay, right? Because it's data science manager, so that's
Exactly.
kind of relatable. But it won't be allowed if I go and do some kind of video production or graphic designing, because it's not related to the data science field.
Exactly.
All right. And that's because I am on the OPT and CPT process, right? That's the requirement.
Yeah, that's right. Because of the visa requirement.
Correct.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. So there are so many things to understand in these things. Probably once we have the understanding of it, it helps us to narrow down our search of the jobs as well, because we need to narrow down our selection itself, because there are so many things available, a limited time, and then you have to apply for the most relevant job. So this will obviously is helpful.
Yeah, and the more you can learn about it too, the better. Well, not just for your own knowledge, but particularly when you're applying, there may be employers, small and mid-sized companies, that have never had to hire someone on CPT or never hired someone full-time on OPT.
Yeah.
And so, there could require a little bit of an educational process in terms of informing prospective employers what CPT is, what OPT is,
Yeah.
what it's required on your end, what it's required from the employer. So I know the ISSO runs a number of different workshops throughout the year. I highly recommend attending those workshops,
Correct.
asking those questions, and making sure that you're really clear in terms of what the requirements are.
Correct. That's very good information, because there's an Instagram page of International Center where they post all these kind of information of all the workshops that happen. Like, of course, CPT workshop, OPT workshops, internships, interviews workshops. So of course they do provide these kind of resources whenever it is required, period to period. So of course that's something to attend for sure. So I've heard about this thing that people can do multiple CPTs. Is that true, or in what cases the multiple CPTs happen? Or
Yeah, it's a great question. So you do get 12 months of being able to use CPT. And so you can do multiple internships. Now, as an F1 visa status student, it does require that you earn credit every time you do an internship, because it's not a required part of your program. And so what that means is when you take your first internship, you'll sign up for the internship course, you'll get credit for that. if your company wanted to extend your internship or you were able to get an internship in another organization, you would actually have to get credit for that class again. We're in the process of creating kind of an advanced internship course, and this will be for students who've already gone through the fundamental course and have gone through all of the sessions and done all of the workload in that first course. They'll have an opportunity to get credit for future internships without having to go through and do all of the previous work they've already done.
Oh, okay, I got it. So just to clarify, when you said to add one more credit, so does it mean like we have to enroll for internship again in the next semester?
It does.
Oh yeah, because we have to pay some fees for that, right?
You would, so you'd have to pay the tuition for that and any of the
Correct.
fees associated with that. And again, this is not a Clark University policy. This is a U.S. government policy.
Correct. So if you can do it 2 credits, but of course you have to enroll in the internship program for the next semester as well if the employer is asking extension for you.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, that's a good info because I did not know that.
And there's been a lot of questions around that. I know at the end we have some, what else, a question around what else, other types of questions have I seen, and that's one that I would say is a regular question I get.
Yeah, okay. So that is something valuable, so you should remember that. And of course, in fact, it's a good deal, to be honest, if the employer is extending your CPT program itself. Does it affect OPT in any case?
So there can be an effect, and this is again where I talk with the ISSO.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe if you worked more than a year on full-time CPT, or you do more than a year of CPT, it affects your OPT, your time on your OPT, and so. Just again, check in with the ISSO. They're the resident experts there, and so you just want to make sure that you're not compromising your OPT because of how much CPT you use.
Correct. That's very important. All right, so I think we have one more last question, which is I saved it for the last. This is just a general understanding of what I asked in the last meeting when I met you, which was a very valuable information. That once we start applying for CPT, there is this duration of 90 days, which we say. So we just wanted to understand what exactly is that concept, and what are the best practices to do this.
Sure. So I think there's 2 processes when it comes to OPT, right? Is that you typically want to apply enough in advance so that you're not getting in a backlog and waiting for your kind of your EAD card to come in. And so I would check with Susanna and Nathan and Amanda over in the ISSO, but it's usually you want to apply for your OPT 90 days before graduation.
Okay.
Now, the second thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pick when you want your OPT to start, your EAD card to come in. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky because you can start it, as soon as you graduate, right? But if you don't have any opportunities at that point and there's not a lot happening in the job search, well, the clock starts ticking at that point, and you have your 90 days from when that EAD card arrives or when OPT starts to secure employment. Unfortunately, if you can't secure employment within those 90 days, then you would have to return back to your home country or find employment opportunities outside of the U.S. But they also give you a little leeway, so you don't have to start it on day one of when you graduate. You could, I believe you typically get 60 to 90 days after graduation from when you can start it. So if you were graduating in mid-May and you set it a start date for July 1st, that means from when you graduate to July 1st, you can't work. Right? Okay. You have to make sure that you get your authorization to work. But those 90 days wouldn't start until July 1st. So you'd actually get to stay until October 1st. Whereas if you started let's say your OPT on May 15th, right? Well, then you would have till August 15th. So it extends out the amount of time to be able to do the job search. But it really depends on the unique situation, and so it can be tricky because there may be companies that want you to start right away, and so if you don't have the authorization, they may just go on to the next candidate because they're not going to wait 2 or 3 months for you to be able to start. And so you want to try to evaluate where you are. Those 90 days before you're graduating. If you have interviews going on, you have some activity happening, well, maybe you want to start your OPT a little bit earlier. But if you're just kind of starting out in the job search or you're not getting much traction, you might want to push that start date out a bit.
Wow, that's very informative. Apart from that 90 days, I was just want to ask one more question. So you mentioned that this 90 days is the clock taking period where you have to find the job. So is there any requirement that we wait for certain times to apply that thing? So that period is not counted. For example, if I graduate in May and I wait until July just to apply my OPT,
Yeah.
right? Is that so? This duration of June, July, is that fine for us to wait in
Yep.
any case?
Yep.
So that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, and it doesn't count towards your 90 days,
Oh, it doesn't count towards the 90. So we can have a break probably.
essentially.
Oh,
Or not a break, but
yeah.
focus on your job search. Right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So we can have that rest period and a job search thing, because let's say someone wants to have more time to just spend on their job search, right? Of course, it has their trade-offs, as you said.
Exactly.
You cannot start your job until that 90 period finishes, 90 days finishes, right? Or the date that you put that you will be starting your OPT.
Exactly.
And even if I get an offer, I cannot start my job.
Legal, you cannot start. Yeah.
And in that case, I can lose my job if the employer is not ready to wait for me.
Correct.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is the trade-off that we are talking about.
And again, it's really tough because there's no science to it. It's
Correct.
sometimes it's just the luck of the drawer.
Yeah.
And it can be a little tricky. So if you have questions, I would recommend talking with Colin, talking
Yeah.
with myself, Susanna, Nathan, Amanda, and we can try to really kind of just look at your situation and pick a date that we think would be best to start.
Yeah. Well, that's that's, as I said, it's a very tricky thing. I'll take one more example. So I'm graduating in May 23 with this one. If I have an offer in my hand, I know that I can start working in June itself, and I do not wish to take any kind of breaks. I'm like, just let's onboard and let's start work. So typically, I should apply for OPT back in March itself or April itself, right? So that I put that, okay, my OPT will start from June itself,
Yep.
because I have the offer in my hand.
Exactly. And where it also can get tricky is, let's say you have an internship
Yeah.
in your last semester, and that internship site offers you a full-time position.
Yeah.
And so if you end your internship in May,
Yeah.
but your OPT doesn't start until, let's say, July 15th, you can't work for that
Yeah.
employer in that time.
In
You would
that
actually
time
have
duration.
you'd have to pause your employment as an intern and then pick up as a full-time employee 6 months after. So if you're in your internship, and you're having conversations around full-time employment, there's that factor that you have to consider and make sure you're communicating with your supervisor and your boss and the HR team there, talking with us. So it can get a little tricky there. too.
Correct. Just watch this last part of the video twice, thrice, because this is a very valuable information, and it will take some time to understand it for sure, because it took me 2 to 3 discussions to understand it properly. And I have met my colleagues in university, of course, who also struggle with this particular concept. It is a little tricky for sure, there's no doubt about it. So if you do not understand in the first go, it's totally normal, and that's why, as Todd mentioned, you can reach out to them anytime, or of course set an appointment, but you are free to come and discuss this thing, because they are here to help you, and then it is something which needs to be discussed. It's not given, and it is new concept for us, so of course there's no shame in discussing and asking questions. So of course that's very much welcomed and appreciated, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely no shame. And I know I'm always learning, Colin's always learning. Again, it's a really confusing process, and there's a lot to learn and remember. And so please ask questions. And if I don't know the questions, and there'll probably be a lot I don't know, I'll ask our friends over at the ISSO to help clarify things.
Correct. So I think that's all I had to ask you in this semi-casual interview session for all our students, and I hope all the information that you provided is very valuable for them. Apart from this, if you have anything else to share to students, of course they are listening, and then it will be helpful, of course, if you have anything else to share.
Yeah, I think the big thing would be, I sent out an announcement regarding our new Assistant Director of Experiential Learning, Colin Moore, and we're so excited to have Colin join the team. He's got a wealth of experience within corporate career management. He's worked at MIT, working with graduate students in the Sloan School of Business there. My recommendation is set up some time, book an appointment with Colin through Handshake, and just have a conversation around your career goals, your directions. Colin can help you really kind of develop a plan and think about how you're going to proactively and strategically manage your career process while you're here at Clark. And that goes for incoming students that are starting their first semester to students who are going to be graduating, this winter. So highly recommend connecting with Colin, starting to really work on your career plan and thinking about how you can manage your career development efforts while you're attending Clark.
Absolutely. That's something to do for sure. And again, thank you very much for your time and all the valuable information that you provided. It is definitely helpful for a lot of students. Again, thank you all for watching this video, and I hope this kind of information is very much helpful to you. And if it is, subscribe to the channel, of course, because that's what I asked in the last. And welcome to the fall. Welcome to Clark University in the fall semester. See us, meet us in the campus, and I think you have a great day ahead. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Todd, for your help.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again for your time.